The podcast opens by framing an urgent cultural phenomenon. Overwhelmingly large numbers of young people in the UK and the US report feeling their lives lack purpose and meaning. This malaise corresponds with rising mental health struggles, such as depression and suicidality. Alongside this crisis, a resurgence in religiosity is noted, with increased belief in God and church attendance among young people, an indicator that many are seeking solutions within spiritual traditions to fill this existential void. The guests collectively acknowledge the scope and profound importance of this purpose crisis, recognizing it as a pressing issue not only for individuals, but for society at large. They situate the question of life's purpose as one of the most vital inquiries human beings can pose, ingrained in the very fabric of what it means to be conscious and self-aware. Yet, while the acknowledgement is universal, the pathways the guests propose and defend to navigate this crisis variably emphasize science, spirituality, or philosophical and theological explanations. Dr. K brings a pragmatic perspective rooted in his clinical work as a psychiatrist addressing people who feel lost or suicidal. He relates purpose not as an abstract metaphysical ideal, but as a practical, measurable psychological experience. Drawing upon scientific studies, he explains how increasing a person's sense of purpose by certain empirically supported practices, including spiritual disciplines and psychotherapy, can improve resilience and reduce suicidality. He elaborates that purpose correlates closely with autonomy, control, and the capacity to engage in chosen, active challenges, rather than simply enduring passive challenges imposed by life. His work emphasizes the importance of reconnecting with internal emotional states, reducing alexithymia, emotional blindness, and fostering a narrative identity to nurture a directional sense in life. Spiritual practices enter here as tools that evoke subjective experiences essential to restoring that sense of meaning and control, which science alone cannot fully generate. Greg Koukl represents the theistic Christian viewpoint, framing human purpose as fundamentally relational, centered on friendship with God, who created humans in his image for communion and flourishing. He articulates how, according to Christian doctrine, purpose is objective and endowed by God, with each person uniquely designed for certain roles reflecting God's loving character. However, Greg confronts the thorny reality of suffering and evil by referencing the doctrine of the fall. An original rebellion by the first humans, Adam and Eve, introduced brokenness into the world. This cosmic rupture explains why suffering, including terrible events like childhood cancer or natural disasters, exists despite a good creator. Greg admits that the full details of how these realities intersect with divine justice and goodness remain mysteries, but maintains that Christianity offers a coherent framework that accounts for evil's existence without negating God's care or ultimate plan for redemption. Alex O'Connor engages from a naturalist, agnostic standpoint, skeptical of explanations, while deeply acknowledging the intensity of human existential struggle. He critiques the simplistic religious response attributing suffering to mythical narratives, e.g., someone ate a forbidden fruit millions of years ago, and argues that such explanations often fail those experiencing acute pain, particularly children. Alex highlights evolutionary biology and neuroscience to explain human motivations for meaning-making, emphasizing that consciousness and awareness of mortality fuel what psychologist Ernest Becker termed immortality projects, our endeavors to create lasting significance beyond death. From his view, suffering and meaning are understandable consequences of a purely naturalistic universe without an intrinsic purpose, and while meaning is constructed subjectively, it remains profoundly real in its psychological effects. The podcast introduces what is called the Paperclip Problem, a philosophical thought experiment querying the notion of purpose assigned by an external creator. It imagines a conscious artificial intelligence whose sole designed purpose is to manufacture paperclips. Though its purpose is literally given, this purpose is plainly insufficient to satisfy the human craving for deeper meaning and philosophical fulfillment. This analogy is used to challenge the idea that simply being made for a purpose, by God or otherwise, guarantees fulfillment. The guests explore whether purpose needs to be inherently valuable or reflective of human nature, rather than arbitrarily assigned. Greg counters that human purpose, unlike a mere paperclip maker, flows from God's loving nature and is not arbitrary, emphasizing relational flourishing over arbitrary tasks. Alex raises skepticism about how any external purpose can fully resolve the complex human condition. A critical point of divergence arises between discussions of whether purpose and meaning are subjective feelings or objective truths. Dr. K focuses on the subjective experience, noting empirical correlations between certain psychological states, like autonomy, connectedness, and self-awareness, and a sense of purpose. He suggests that regardless of metaphysical truth, improving this internal sense is vital to well-being. Greg emphasizes that subjective meaning is insufficient if unconnected to ultimate truth. He believes that meaning must align with the objective purpose God has for humans to be truly fulfilled, and that some subjective senses of purpose may be illusory or partial without that grounding. Alex, meanwhile, insists that subjective experiences are evidential in their own right, but don't necessarily validate any transcendent truth claim, introducing a distinction between experiential benefits and philosophical validity. Alex discusses at length the uniquely human predicament of self-aware mortality, which separates humans from other animals by imposing an awareness of life's finite nature. This awareness drives much of human behavior as an attempt to transcend death through immortality projects, legacies, children, religious beliefs promising eternal souls. The guests reflect on how death's inevitability can either motivate purposeful engagement or nihilism. The myth of Sisyphus is invoked to symbolize how people may persist in seemingly absurd or futile tasks as a form of rebellion, cultivating meaning through attitude rather than external validation. The tension between embracing mortality realistically and the human desire to transcend it remains a core dimension of the meaning conversation. Dr. K juxtaposes traditional scientific and psychological approaches with spiritual practice as a bridge to experiential meaning. He explains that religious rituals, meditations, and community worship create structured environments to evoke transformative subjective experiences, a critical missing piece that science's descriptive tools cannot replicate. The conversation embraces a wide range of spiritual practices, from meditation rooted in yogic chakras to psychedelics, arguing that these methods alter brain chemistry and neural networks, particularly impacting the default mode network associated with ego and self-identity. The dissolution or attenuation of ego boundaries is presented as a pathway to encountering something greater, the divine or cosmic consciousness, which many traditions conceive as the ultimate source of meaning. The guests engage deeply with the problem of evil, unpacking the emotional and intellectual difficulties posed by seemingly unnecessary suffering, especially in children. Greg presents the traditional Christian response of a broken world due to human rebellion, while cautioning not to trivialize or offer simplistic answers to those suffering intensely. Alex and Dr. K emphasize that no worldview today offers a perfect explanation for existential pain, though naturalistic perspectives account for suffering as inherent to material processes without moral intentionality. They acknowledge, however, the psychological importance of narrative and meaning-making in aiding coping and healing, noting that empirical work shows the beneficial effects of some conceptual frameworks, even if ultimate metaphysical justifications remain elusive. All three guests highlight the individual, ongoing nature of the quest for meaning. Greg's Christian perspective centers on faith as a relational commitment, not merely an intellectual assent, involving prayer, trust, and experiential knowledge of God over time. Likewise, Alex describes the agnostic position as an honest acknowledgement of uncertainty combined with active exploration, intellectual humility, and openness. Dr. K shares his personal journey, blending spirituality, clinical science, and Eastern practices, conveying the importance of layered and evolving approaches tailored to individual circumstances. The consensus is that meaning cannot be provided wholesale or simply transmitted. It must be lived, discovered, and continuously refined in a person's life. When asked for actionable advice, each guest provides nuanced but concrete suggestions. Dr. K stresses reconnecting with internal feelings, dissolving egocentric defenses, and engaging in active challenges to regain purpose, suggesting spiritual practices or therapy as avenues to catalyze breakthrough experiences. Greg proposes a simple but profound spiritual step, a prayer inviting God's presence and revelation as a starting point toward uncovering ultimate purpose. Alex urges caution about simplistic solutions, recommending honest inquiry, exploration of consciousness, and sometimes the carefully supervised use of psychedelics as tools to invigorate the search. Collectively, their advice recognizes the variability of individuals' needs, but insists on intentionality and commitment as keys to progress. Toward the close, the conversation turns to consciousness itself, the inexplicable, subjective reality that underlies all experience and imbues reality with significance. Alex explains attraction to panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is fundamental and ubiquitous, rather than a mere emergent property of matter. Neuroscientific findings supporting the notion that the brain acts as a filter or focuser for a deeper consciousness are cited. Greg concurs that consciousness points beyond materialist explanations and that the dissolution of egoic illusions, central to spiritual awakening, is foundational to experiencing ultimate meaning and connection. The ineffability of such spiritual experiences is emphasized, underscoring that meaning ultimately resides in encounters with this profound mystery, inaccessible to purely rational explanation, but transformative to human lives.